It wasn't the betrayal that broke you. It was the silence after. Not theirs. Yours, because somewhere between "I should have known" and "I won't let it happen again," you stopped talking. Not out loud, that wasn't the problem. You smiled. You nodded. You played nice. You said all the right things, wore all the right masks, but behind your eyes, everything was burning. You saw it, didn't you? The shift. The way their respect disappeared the moment you needed something. The way your silence got mistaken for weakness. The way your kindness made them think you were blind. You weren't blind. You were watching, and what you saw, what you felt, was the slow erosion of your power. Not all at once, bit by bit, choice by choice, until suddenly you were being managed like a threat, by people not even qualified to stand next to you. That's when you learn something most people never admit. Being good at reading people doesn't protect you. It just makes betrayal feel slower, because you saw it coming. You just didn't stop it. Why? Because part of you still wanted to believe in fairness, in logic, in loyalty, in something, and they exploited that. They counted on it. But here's what they didn't count on: that you'd get quiet. Not from fear, not from confusion, but calculation. Because the moment you stopped reacting, they lost their control. They thought they were playing you, but they didn't realize you were done playing. They didn't realize you were already rewriting the rules with their own move. And this time, you're not walking into the game to win. You're walking in to own the board. They always start the same way. Smiles that stretch too wide. Compliments that feel just a little too timed. An offer that sounds generous until you realize what it really costs. Power never enters loudly. It arrives wearing politeness, because control doesn't need to threaten you. Not when it can make you thank it. That's how they do it. They ask how you are just to map your tone. They give you a seat just to watch if you stand. They let you speak only to memorize the way your voice breaks when you're uncertain. They don't need a file on you. You give them everything. Your need to be understood, your discomfort with silence, your eagerness to prove you're good, your quiet desire to be chosen. And they collect it all. They store it like a weapon, because now they know what you defend, what you explain, what you overthink, what you'll walk away from, what you'll tolerate, and more importantly, what you won't. So they test it. A small interruption, a missed message, a joke with your name in it, a compliment they suddenly give someone else instead of you, and they watch. They watch for the twitch in your lip, the hesitation in your yes, the fraction of a second it takes for you to decide if you'll say something or let it slide. You let it slide because you're calm, because you're civil, because you don't want to seem dramatic, because you think they'll stop if you just keep proving you're not a threat. They don't stop, because now they know the truth. You're not protecting the relationship. You're protecting your image inside of it, and that means they own you quietly, legally, elegantly, because now every move they make is a test, not of their power, of your self-permission. You think they're provoking you. They're not. They're training you. They're showing you how much discomfort you'll swallow in the name of peace, how many small humiliations you'll absorb to avoid a scene, how deeply your identity is tied to being seen a certain way. And once they see that, they don't need to raise their voice. They just need to raise an eyebrow. You do the rest. You explain yourself. You soften your tone. You apologize for something you didn't do. You thank them for feedback that wasn't earned. You nod at logic that doesn't serve you. You shrink strategically. You think you're managing the moment. You're not. You're managing their perception of you. But here's the part they always forget. The more pressure they apply, the more still you become. And eventually, the silence shifts. Not the silence of suppression, the silence of control, because now you are the one watching. They thought they were watching you fall apart. They didn't realize they were watching you sharpen, because silence, when chosen, is not absence. It's aim. You stopped defending yourself not because you lost the argument, but because you lost respect for the person who needed it. You didn't walk away because you were overwhelmed. You walked away because you realized nothing about them was worth confronting. Control doesn't always look like a smirk or a threat. Sometimes it looks like walking into the room and saying nothing, and watching them adjust their posture. Because now, you don't need to dominate the room. You are the pressure in it. That's the shift. You're no longer trying to be liked or respected or understood. You're not explaining your boundaries. You're not announcing your standards. You're not posting your worth in digestible quotes and hoping someone sees it. You're done projecting power. Now you carry it. And that's what unravels them. Not your words. Not your decisions. Not even your success. But the fact that you don't need to be witnessed anymore. They don't know how to process that. Because their entire strategy was built around your reactions. Your softness. Your conflict avoidance. Your need to explain yourself every time they twisted the facts. But now, you let them twist. You let them lie. You let them create whatever narrative they need to feel tall again. Because you've realized something they never expected you to see. You don't control people by correcting them. You control them by letting them underestimate you. That's Machiavelli's game. It was never about being feared. It was about being unreadable. Because the unreadable cannot be predicted, and the unpredictable cannot be controlled. That's what you've become. Not louder. Not more aggressive. Just unavailable. Unavailable for the patterns that drained you. Unavailable for the dynamics that used your empathy as a leash. Unavailable for the games that require your attention to survive. And they feel it. The disconnection, the detachment, the void where your need used to live. And now they chase it. They chase your approval. Your reaction. Your softness, like a scent that's no longer in the room. Because now, they're not sure who you are anymore. And that terrifies them. They won't say it. They'll act like you changed. Like you became distant, cold, disrespectful. But they won't say what really scares them. That you stopped playing the part they wrote for you. See, they were never loyal to you. They were loyal to the version of you that made them feel important, secure, superior. The version that explained, that waited, that forgave without being asked. The version that smiled through disrespect and called it emotional maturity. But when you killed that version, they didn't know what to do with you. Because now, you walk into rooms without adjusting your energy. You let people misunderstand you without lifting a finger to fix it. You hear manipulation and respond with nothing. You've become what they feared most. Not angry, indifferent. They always knew how to handle anger. Anger meant you still cared. Anger meant they could bait you. Anger gave them ground to call you unstable, dramatic, reactive. But this version of you that doesn't flinch, it's untouchable. And that makes you dangerous. Not because you're looking for revenge, but because you're no longer available for the cycle. You've stopped needing resolution, closure, accountability, anything. You've realized the only real leverage is distance without announcement. That's what breaks them, not the fact that you left. The fact that you left without needing to be right. Because people like that don't survive in silence. They feed on being the misunderstood hero. They need the story to continue, even if it's in conflict. But when you remove yourself completely, when you go quiet without guilt, the story dies. And without a story, they're forced to look at the truth. That all along, they weren't controlling you. They were controlling your need to be seen. And now that it's gone, so is their script, so is their mask, so is their power. And all that's left is a confused silence. In the shape of your absence. They might try to come back, not because they've changed, because you did. Because power doesn't attract apologies, it attracts strategy. And the moment they feel your distance, they don't panic over what they lost. They panic over what they can no longer use, so they adjust. Suddenly, they're supportive, reflective, nostalgic. They bring up memories, not because they miss you, but because they miss who you were around them. Compliant, kind, manageable. But this version of you doesn't flinch at memories, because you don't miss the past. You see it clearly now. And once you see clearly, Emotional blackmail doesn't work anymore because that's all it ever was. A transaction disguised as affection, attention disguised as loyalty, validation disguised as care. You don't fall for it now. You don't decode texts. You don't wonder what their silence means. You don't reach for closure. You don't rehearse how to say no gently enough to be respected. You just stop responding, not to the message, to the manipulation, and that's when it happens. The shift. They accuse you of being heartless, of switching up, of becoming someone else. But they're wrong. You didn't become someone else. You just stopped performing for people who only clapped when you played small. That's not cold. That's clarity. And clarity isn't loud. It isn't vengeful. It doesn't need to prove anything. It just walks away and never looks back. Because real control isn't about making someone feel you've left. It's making them feel you're never coming back. And when they realize that, when they feel the full weight of your absence, when they understand they have no access, no explanation, no crack to crawl through, they unravel. Not publicly, not dramatically, but slowly, privately, because the loss of control over someone they thought they owned is a grief they never learned to name. And that's the real consequence, not your silence, your evolution. There's a moment one most people never notice. It's quiet, barely visibly, but absolute. It's the moment you stop needing to win, not because you've given up, not because you've lost, but because you finally see the truth. Power is never proven. Each felt. The people who want to control you will always try to pull you back into the game, with guilt, with kindness, with logic, with shame. They'll mirror your language, pretend to reflect, apologize just enough to reopen the loop. But if you're still looking for fairness, you'll fall for it, because fairness is the bait. They don't want to make things fair. They want to make things even. They want you reactive, emotional, exposed, so they can reframe the story, so they can say, see, you were the problem too. But you don't give them that. Not anymore. Now, your strength lives in the disconnect. You don't explain. You observe. You don't argue. You extract. You don't expose them. You let them expose themselves. That's control. Not in the loud moves, in the invisible ones. In the restraint, in the refusal to clarify, in the conversations you no longer start, in the places you no longer show up, in the reactions you no longer offer. That's what shakes them. The stillness, because it doesn't give them anything to push against. They can't fight silence. They can't dissect detachment. They can't twist neutrality. They're left spinning in a room with no walls, trying to define a version of you that no longer exists. And you're already elsewhere. You don't need revenge. You don't need closure. You don't even need peace. You are peace, because nothing owns you anymore. Not their words, not their silence, not even their memory. You took it all back without permission, without announcement, without noise. And that's why you win. Not because they lost, but because you left the game entirely. You don't attract loyalty by being likable. You command it by being dangerous to betray. That's what Machiavelli understood. And it's what most people still refuse to accept. They want to be chosen for their goodness, loved for their patience, respected for their vulnerability. But power doesn't reward virtue. It rewards leverage, not the kind you ask for. The kind you become leverage the moment you stop fearing loss. When you stop asking what someone thinks of you and start watching what they do when they think you're no longer useful. It's ugly, and it's perfect, because now their mask slips. Now you're no longer blind to the subtle shifts, the delay in their tone, the precision in their compliments. The moment they laugh when someone else undermines you and think you didn't catch it, but you catch everything and you say nothing. Because when you see the game, you don't yell at the dealer. You count the cards. You wait. You let them think you're still naive, still pliable, still emotionally accessible. Because when they feel safe, that's when they show you who they are. And when they do, you don't confront it. You leverage it, not to retaliate, not to destroy, just to own the next move. That's real control. Not in forcing outcomes, but in removing people's ability to predict you. They want your loyalty to be public, but You've made it private. They want your attention on demand, but you've made it earned. They want your softness on standby, but you've made it extinct. Now, they don't get access. They don't get reactions. They don't get the benefit of your presence while betting against your power, because you've learned something they never expected. Silence is not retreat, it's alignment. And you no longer share energy with people whose loyalty is conditional on your obedience. You've become your own consequence, and they feel it. Every time you don't answer, every time you don't flinch, every time you walk past what used to control you without looking twice. You don't need to raise your standards. You just need to enforce the ones you already had. The problem was never that you let people in. It was that you let them stay after they showed you why they shouldn't. You told yourself it was empathy. It was fear. Fear of confrontation. Fear of conflict. Fear of being alone with the version of you that no longer plays nice, just to keep the peace. But that version, that's the one that wins. Not because they don't feel, but because they don't negotiate with their own clarity. You remember what happened when you did. The slow corrosion, the subtle contempt, the way they started treating your silence like permission, the way their apologies got shorter, colder, not because they respected you, but because they calculated you wouldn't leave. They were right. For a while, you kept choosing peace. But peace doesn't exist when it costs you self-respect. That's not peace. That's quiet control. It's what they want. For you to stay regulated, measured, forgiving, so they can be messy and still feel superior. They don't want to change. They want you to normalize their behavior so they don't have to. That's the real betrayal. Not what they did, but what they got comfortable doing, knowing you'd stay. But now they don't know what you'll do, because your energy is unreadable, your tone is flat, your answers are short, your absence is sharp. You've stopped explaining yourself into exhaustion, and they feel it. They feel the shift from access to observation, from familiarity to detachment, from "I hope they get it" to "I don't care if they do." And that's the real sting. Not your anger, your absence of investment, because people can survive your rejection. What they can't survive is your indifference. The realization that your attention is no longer theirs to manipulate, that your presence is no longer theirs to assume, that your approval is no longer theirs to weaponize. And that's the moment they understand they never really had you. They just had access to the parts of you that didn't yet know their value. But now they don't even have that. You don't become powerful by being feared. You become powerful by becoming unreachable. Not in distance, in definition. Because when no one can define you, they can't prepare for you. And when they can't prepare for you, they default to projection. They call you arrogant, cold, guarded, too much, too little, too something. But here's the truth they'll never say out loud. They don't hate your boundaries. They hate that your boundaries don't move when they push. They hate that you no longer rush to clarify, to soften, to apologize for the space you take up, because they've realized you don't need to be perceived correctly anymore. You've stopped trying to manage their narrative. You've stopped giving them influence over your identity. And that, to them, is a threat, because your detachment isn't just personal, it's structural. You've removed their ability to regulate their own self-worth through you. No more ego boosts. No more emotional hits. No more validation on demand. You've collapsed their supply, and when people lose control over you, they'll say you've changed. But you didn't change. You just withdrew the version of you they were exploiting. That's the real loss. Not your friendship, not your love, not your loyalty. The loss of leverage. They don't miss you. They miss the power they had when you needed them. And now, they sit in the quiet of your absence, replaying every moment where they could have chosen respect, but chose control. It's too late, because you're no longer punishable, no longer predictable, no longer programmable through guilt, shame, flattery, or chaos. You've become something else entirely. Unshakable. And in a world addicted to attention, to noise, to false connection, that kind of stillness is terrifying, because they know what it means. It means you're not coming back. Not for them. Not for closure. Not even for justice. You've outgrown the entire dynamic. And once that happens, there's nothing left to fix. There's only distance and silence and power. They won't forget you. That's what they never understood. You don't become unforgettable by being agreeable. You become unforgettable by becoming the moment they realized they couldn't control you. That's what haunts them. Not your rejection, your restraint. Because they expected you to fight. They expected drama, a meltdown, a desperate plea for understanding. But you gave them nothing. No message, no warning, no reaction. Just silence. Final, clean, surgical. That's what keeps them up at night. Not the fear that you hate them, the fear that you don't think about them at all, that they had access to a version of you they never earned. And now, even if they became everything you once hoped for, they'd still be too late, because there's no going back. Not for them, and not for you. You've seen too much, felt too much, learned too much. You've learned that loyalty is worthless without respect, that empathy without boundaries is a liability, that love without clarity is a leash, and that peace isn't something you find in others. It's what you become when you stop needing to be chosen. You've stopped seeking. Now you select. You observe, not because you're cold, but because you've learned the cost of letting the wrong people too close. You stay silent, not because you have nothing to say, but because you've realized the loudest power is the one that doesn't explain itself. You walk away, not to prove a point, but because your presence is no longer up for negotiation. You've become the lesson, not the one they'll quote, the one they'll remember. In every room where respect is missing, in every moment they meet someone with your softness, but not your silence, and realize too late you weren't replaceable. You were a warning. And now, your name doesn't echo like a loss. It echoes like a line they should have never crossed.